a group of heroes gets summoned from another world. Apparently, every kingdom has just hired Truck-kun to solve their problems for them. The heroes are greeted by a princess who looks thrilled to see them, and one by one, their powers get appraised. The first guy? Holy sword. The next? All kinds of magic. Basically, everyone gets something that screams main character. And then there's Mukoda. His big reveal? Online grocery. That's right, he didn't get fireballs or divine blessings, he got Amazon. Understandably, he's horrified. He even asks if maybe there's a mistake or a hidden bonus skill somewhere, but no, that's it, just grocery shopping. Still, protocol's protocol, he's told he still has to meet the king. The heroes are presented before him, and the king gives the classic speech, "Our kingdom is under attack by the Demon King. Brave heroes, we need your help." The others jump in without hesitation, ready to save the world. Meanwhile, Mukoda quietly raises his hand and says, "Yeah, I think I'll pass." He explains he's not exactly hero material and just wants to live a simple life. Surprisingly, they don't throw him in the dungeon for it. Instead, they hand him 20 gold coins and send him on his way. Pretty good deal, honestly. Out in town, Mukoda immediately notices people staring at him. Turns out, jeans and a t-shirt don't exactly blend in. He buys some local clothes, rents a room at an inn, and starts learning about this world. The more he thinks about it, the more suspicious that fancy castle starts to seem. The war-torn kingdom sure didn't look short on luxury, so Mukoda decides to get out while he still can. When he checks his stats, he sees he's got 2 other skills, item storage and appraisal. He tries out the online grocery thing, and suddenly, a digital shopping page pops up right in front of him. Out of curiosity, he orders some bottled water and food, pays by literally dropping gold coins into the screen, and seconds later, poof, a delivery package appears. Mukoda stares in disbelief, then grins. Okay, maybe this skill isn't so bad after all. It's basically like Amazon Prime with teleportation. He figures out that 1 gold coin is worth around $100, which makes him comfortably rich for now. The next morning, he hitches a ride with a merchant heading out of the kingdom. During the trip, the merchant mentions that item storage is extremely rare, maybe 1 in 1,000 people have it. Appraisal though? That's basically unheard of, unless you're a summoned hero. Mukoda tries to play it cool while internally panicking. When asked where he's headed, he says he's going to the next kingdom. The merchant nods and says, "That's smart, because this one's about to collapse." By the time they reach the tavern, they find out all carriage services have been shut down. The king doesn't want anyone leaving. Great. Mukoda realizes he's stuck unless he finds another way out. So he heads to the Adventurers Guild and hires an escort. The trip will take several days on foot, and the cost? 8 gold coins. Painful, but better than dying alone in the woods. His escort turns out to be Werner, a C-ranked adventurer with a party of 4. Vincent the swordsman, Rita the scout, Ramon the mage, and Fank the healer. They set out the next day, and during a lunch break, Mukoda pulls a stove out of his storage like it's the most normal thing ever. Everyone stares. He starts cooking, pulling out ingredients from nowhere, and soon the smell of soup fills the air. The others take a bite. Instant soup and sandwiches, mind you, and act like it's the best thing they've ever tasted. Mukoda just smiles, pretending it's all homemade. Of course, the peace doesn't last. They get attacked by monsters, and while Werner's team slices through them with ease, Mukoda mostly screams and hides behind a tree. When the group takes down a massive red boar, they strip it for materials, but can't carry all the meat, so Mukoda offers to store it. Once again, jaws drop. That night, they sit down for dinner, everyone waiting eagerly for Mukoda's next meal. He laughs nervously, saying he's not used to people watching him cook, but really, he just doesn't want anyone realizing his big secret. Tonight's menu is bacon, cabbage, potatoes, and sausages, all simmered together into a stew that smells way too good for a campsite. He serves it up and immediately starts to worry when everyone goes quiet after the first bite. For a moment, he thinks it tastes awful, but no, they're just too busy eating to talk. They love it so much they ask for seconds. Ramon admits they usually survive on jerky and hard bread while traveling, so this feels like luxury dining to them. Rita even says she feels stronger already, which makes Mukoda raise an eyebrow. Curious, he uses his appraisal skill and realizes the food actually gives stat boosts. His cooking literally makes people stronger. That's not the kind of talent you advertise unless you want to wake up in a royal kitchen forever. He decides to keep it a secret. What he doesn't know is that something is watching from the bushes, drawn by the smell of his cooking. A few days later, the party camps near the border of the next kingdom. Mukoda decides to grill some of the red boar meat they collected earlier. He slices it up, seasons it with a special sauce from his online shop, and starts cooking. The smell is mouth-watering, and it doesn't just get the attention of his companions. Whatever has been following them finally decides to show itself. When Mukoda finishes the meal, everyone is amazed by how good it tastes. They're still complimenting him when the forest suddenly goes silent. Out of nowhere, a massive wolf steps out of the trees. A Fenrir, a legendary beast. And then it talks, demanding a plate of the meat. Mukoda hands one over without arguing. The Fenrir gulps it down in one bite and asks for more. Mukoda, who values his life, keeps cooking. The beast keeps eating until it's finally full. Then, it says it wants to form a familiar contract with him. Mukoda immediately refuses, but the Fenrir's glare changes his mind faster than any negotiation ever could. The contract activates with a blinding glow, and just like that, Mukoda is now the master, or possibly the servant, of a legendary creature. The Fenrir explains that Mukoda is now responsible for feeding him 3 meals a day. Mukoda stares blankly, realizing he's just become a full-time chef for a mythical wolf. When asked to give it a name, he tries a few normal ones, none of which impress the creature. Finally, he shortens Fenrir to Fel, and the beast approves. Traveling with Fel becomes an adventure in itself. Everywhere they go, people run away at the sight of him. Warner explains that there's a legend about a Fenrir that wiped out an entire country, and apparently, it's not just a story. Fel calmly says he'll destroy anyone who tries to bother them. That doesn't really make anyone feel safer. Later, when Mukoda realizes they're out of meat, Fel demands food again. Mukoda snaps that he eats too much and tells him to catch his own. To everyone's surprise, Fel actually listens. A short while later, he returns carrying a rock bird, a B-rank monster that normal adventurers struggle to defeat. Werner is speechless. Fel tells them they can have the materials as long as he gets the meat. Mukoda cooks the bird like chicken, adding teriyaki sauce for flavor. He serves the others first, then tells Fel he'll have to wait for his portion since he eats enough for 10 people. Fel patiently waits, which might be the most shocking part of all this. When his giant serving is finally ready, he devours it in seconds and seems completely satisfied. Eventually, they reach the border of the kingdom of Venin. The guards are already on edge, watching Fel like he's about to attack. Werner goes ahead to explain the situation, but before long, they're surrounded by soldiers. The commander refuses to let them pass, worried that a Fenrir could destroy the entire country. Mukoda begs Fel to behave, and Fel calmly promises to only attack anyone who harms them. Not exactly reassuring, but it works. The guards are terrified that the beast can talk, yet they eventually allow them to enter. Everyone shows their guild cards except Mukoda, who has to pay another fee because he doesn't have one. Werner warns him to stay low-key since a man traveling with a legendary beast will attract trouble. Mukoda sighs, realizing that peace and quiet are officially impossible. The group suggests he join a guild to make money using his online grocery skill. Vincent recommends the Adventurers Guild since they deal with monster materials, while Mukoda leans toward the Merchant Guild. Franca mentions that it's possible to register for both, so Mukoda keeps that in mind. When they arrive in town, Mukoda immediately gets hit with another entry fee. A servant rushes up to greet him, insisting he come meet the count, calling him the legendary beast tamer. Mukoda tries to refuse politely, but when the man won't take no for an answer, Fel steps forward and growls. The servant takes off running. Problem solved. Werner worries they might have just made an enemy, but Fel simply says he can handle anything they throw at him. Vincent jokes that only a dragon could match him. Mukoda's eyes widen at the mention of dragons, and Fel casually says he fought one 400 years ago, like it was no big deal. After completing the paperwork for their escort job, the group parts ways. They thank Mukoda for all the amazing food, and he finally heads to the Merchant Guild. People stare and move aside when they see Fel following him. Inside, Mukoda signs up, learns there are 5 merchant ranks, and receives his Iron Tier card. Later that night, he discovers beasts aren't allowed in inns. Fel doesn't care about that rule, he only cares about dinner. Mukoda sighs, sets up his stove, and starts cooking again. This time he adds rice to the meal and finishes it with one of his special sauces. Fel eats it eagerly, then pauses and says the flavor changed. Mukoda reveals he has all sorts of sauces tucked away in his magical pantry, and Fel is absolutely fascinated. The same meat but with different flavors? That's practically sorcery to him. After sampling a few, Fel declares that the garlic one reigns supreme. Mukoda just nods, knowing full well that he's created a monster with a taste for seasoning. Once Fel's done eating half his body weight, Mukoda finally cooks for himself. A simple beef bowl, rich, steamy, and dangerously delicious. One bite in, and he's shocked at his own talent. After dinner, he packs up the goods he plans to sell the next day, trying to be productive before exhaustion wins. Morning comes, and he makes his way to the merchant guild to see if his modern products can fetch a decent price. The clerk takes one look at his salt and pepper, freezes like she's seen divine treasure, and bolts. Mukoda blinks, wondering if he's about to be arrested. Instead, she returns and leads him straight to the guildmaster. The guildmaster examines the goods with reverence, saying the salt and pepper are of royal quality. When he asks where Mukoda found them, Mukoda simply says, "On my travels," which is technically true if you count traveling through an online store. The guildmaster respects his privacy and offers 14 gold for the lot. Mukoda nearly chokes. He bought them for 5 copper each. As he's still processing the math, the guildmaster mistakes his silence for hesitation and raises the price again. By the time the deal closes at 17 gold, Mukoda's grinning like he just robbed a bank. Making money has never felt this easy. With gold in his pocket, he heads to the Adventurers Guild next. The mood there is the complete opposite. The clerk looks like she's working her last nerve, barely glancing at him as she slides over the registration form. Mukoda fills it out, hands it back, and she tosses him a card like it's a used napkin. He's now a proud G-rank adventurer. When he asks for an explanation, she sighs and gives him the basics. Ranks go from G to S, and the guild doesn't take responsibility if he dies. Warm welcome. Mukoda browses the job board and decides to start with a simple herb gathering quest. The next morning, as he quietly prepares to leave, Fel fixes him with a glare that clearly means breakfast first. So Mukoda suggests he go hunt again. Fel grumbles but agrees, saying he'll cast a protective barrier before leaving since there are monsters nearby. Then he takes off, leaving Mukoda to his herbal adventure. Finding herbs turns out to be ridiculously easy thanks to his appraisal skill. Within no time, he's done, even collecting more than required. Feeling accomplished, he sets up lunch, deciding on something cheap and simple. Spaghetti. He's mid-cook when Fel returns, dragging a rockbird behind him like it's a grocery bag. He casually mentions that he hunted a few other monsters too, but couldn't carry them all. Mukoda suggests they pick them up later. When the spaghetti's ready, Fel eyes it suspiciously, wondering what kind of human food this is. Mukoda explains it's from his world and invites him to try it. Fel takes one bite and is instantly hooked, even without his usual mountain of meat. Mukoda hands him some Parmesan cheese and Fel's mind is blown all over again. The majestic Fenrir, now covered in sauce and cheese powder, looks like a toddler who lost a fight with a pasta bowl. Mukoda can't stop laughing. Then he turns and sees the pile of monsters Fel had hunted earlier. It's not a pile, it's a mountain. He starts packing everything into his storage, asking if it's all even edible. Fel explains that orcs are considered a delicacy, basically walking pigs. Mukoda decides he doesn't want to think too hard about that. Back in town, he submits his herb quest and gets paid 9 silver. Not bad for a few plants. Then he casually asks about selling monster materials. The clerk looks unimpressed until he points to Fel. Her entire demeanor changes. She quickly leads him to the guild butcher, who's already heard rumors about the man with the legendary beast. Out back, Mukoda unloads the entire monster mountain. The butcher just stares, speechless, as A-rank monsters tumble out of storage. Mukoda asks for everything to be skinned and sold except the meat. With so much work to do, the butcher tells him to return the next day. Mukoda requests one orc to be prepared for dinner, and soon enough he's back to cooking. His storage skill keeps everything fresh, so he slices up the orc meat, coats it in flour, and fries it to golden perfection. He finishes it with leftover sauce from lunch, and Fel digs in, declaring it far better than any boar. Mukoda hesitates at first, trying not to picture what he's eating, but once he tastes it, he's pleasantly surprised. Turns out, orc meat is delicious if you can ignore what it used to be. The next morning, Mukoda returns to the butcher, who has mountains of processed materials waiting. He pays Mukoda 202 gold, and Mukoda nearly faints. The butcher even explains that some items, like orc tusks and other parts, sell for impressive prices. He also gives Mukoda a handful of demonic stones dropped by A-rank monsters, telling him they're packed with magic energy. Word has spread around town about the man with the Fenrir. Some people say Fel is just a great wolf, others argue he's the real thing. Mukoda listens to the gossip as he walks through the streets, deciding it's time to move on before they attract more attention. Fel doesn't care where they go, as long as he gets fed. Mukoda sighs but agrees. Before leaving, he opens his shop one last time, showing Fel all the meats from his world. Fel stares, wide-eyed, drooling like it's raining from the ceiling. Mukoda orders a little bit of everything and cooks up a massive feast of mixed meats. Fel takes his first bite and looks like he's just discovered the meaning of life. The mix of textures and flavors is completely new to him, and it shows. Mukoda, of course, doesn't stop there. He brings out the main dish, Japanese black wagyu, glistening and perfect. Fel eyes the small portion, visibly disappointed that something so tiny is supposed to be impressive, but the moment he tastes it, his entire mood changes. One bite and he's instantly hooked. Mukoda explains that it's from a cow raised with special care, as if that somehow justifies the size. After the meal, Fel feels unstoppable. He declares he could probably fight a dragon right now, and honestly, Mukoda believes him. Just to be sure, he uses his appraisal skill and discovers that all of Fel's stats have skyrocketed. Apparently, Wagyu doesn't just make your mouth happy, it turns divine beasts into powerhouses. Feeling the rush, Fel decides to go hunting, while Mukoda panics at the thought of being left alone in a world full of monsters. Fel shrugs it off, casts a magical barrier around him, and assures him it's strong enough to block a dragon's breath. Then he sprints off into the night, leaving Mukoda to do what he does best. Sleep. Meanwhile, Fel goes on a full-blown rampage through the forest. He slices through a rockbird in one swing, zaps a giant deer with lightning, and when a chimera shows up, he obliterates it in a single blast that could probably be seen from orbit. The next morning, Mukoda wakes up surrounded by mountains of monster corpses. Fel casually admits he might have gone a little overboard, while Mukoda stares in disbelief. Seeing the aftermath, he immediately bans black wagyu from his cooking menu. Later, while taking a break, Mukoda asks about Fel's magic. Fel explains he's blessed by the wind goddess and specializes in wind magic, saying it like it's the most normal thing in the world. Mukoda, amazed, wonders if he can learn magic too. Fel tells him it's possible if he has mana. Mukoda checks his stats, finds he does, and gets excited. Fel's instruction is simple, just think about it. Mukoda focuses, imagines a fireball, and absolutely nothing happens. Fel sighs, shows him how to control mana properly, and after some effort, Mukoda manages to produce a tiny fireball that looks more like a spark than a spell. Fel calls it weak, but decides the best way to improve is hands-on training. Mukoda immediately refuses, but Fel doesn't listen. He just picks him up and carries him straight into a goblin village. When Mukoda sees the swarm of goblins, he freezes, but Fel, in his infinite wisdom, howls to grab their attention and runs off to find the boss. Mukoda panics and starts throwing fireballs in every direction. He keeps firing until his mana runs dry and collapses on the spot. Fel returns, finishes the fight, and proudly announces that Mukoda has leveled up. When Mukoda checks, he finds he's gained the fire magic skill, which almost makes the trauma worth it. As a gift, Fel drags back the Goblin King, not for food, but for the magic stone inside it. Mukoda is exhausted and refuses to cook, so he buys some sweetbread instead. Fel complains about the lack of meat, but when he tries the bread, he admits it's good and asks for more. Mukoda warns him about cavities and diabetes, but Fel laughs, saying he's immune to sickness because he's blessed by the wind goddess. Mukoda sighs, calling it unfair, while somewhere above, the goddess herself watches them eat pastries and starts craving them. When they reach the next town, Mukoda shows his guild card and introduces Fel as his great wolf, familiar to avoid attracting attention. Fel is not pleased but tolerates it. The guard warns Mukoda he'll be held responsible for any damage Fel causes, which doesn't exactly calm his nerves. Inside the town, Mukoda goes looking for a map and ends up in a tavern full of loud adventurers. He buys them drinks, asks about the area, and gets offered an ancient map for 1 gold coin. Feeling lucky, he buys it, only to find out later that the map is worthless and could be bought for a single silver at the guild. Fel tells him not to worry, they'll earn more money, and Mukoda quietly swallows his embarrassment. They decide to head east toward the sea, mostly because Fel wants to try seafood. Meanwhile, the wind goddess Menri can't stop watching them. She's curious about Mukoda, the only human who managed to form a contract with Fel, and now she's obsessed with the sweets he keeps making. She tries to resist interfering, but her craving is clearly winning. As they travel through the forest, Fel starts running so fast he's practically crashing through trees. When he finally stops, covered in scratches, Mukoda points out that maybe slowing down would help. Fel insists they've reached the sea, but it's just a lake. Apparently, he got hungry for fish. Mukoda wonders how they'll catch anything without a rod, and Fel solves that by electrocuting the lake. Mukoda sighs but collects the floating fish anyway. Fel tells him to grab the pink ones that make his tongue tingle, which sounds immediately suspicious. Mukoda appraises them, and, of course, they're poisonous. He refuses to cook them, and Fel sulks, but gives up. Mukoda starts a fire, buys some ingredients, and begins preparing the fish, silently thanking every cooking video he's ever watched. He cleans, salts, and grills them perfectly. When they finally eat, Fel is speechless. The mighty divine beast who can destroy a chimera with one blow is completely defeated by grilled trout, and Mukoda can't help but enjoy the quiet victory. Fel devours the food like it's his last meal on Earth, and Mukoda, feeling fancy, cracks open a beer to go with his fish. Naturally, they both end up stuffed to the brim. Just when things start to quiet down, Mukoda suddenly spots a blue slime bouncing toward him and nearly jumps out of his skin. Fel casually tells him not to worry since it's weaker than a wet tissue. Mukoda pokes it and realizes it feels like jelly, then the slime gives him a little high five as if saying, "Nice to meet you." He checks its stats and finds out it's just a baby, barely 3 days old. The slime bobs around happily, and Mukoda guesses it might be hungry, but his food stash is empty. The slime ends up eating a bottle instead, and Fel mentions that slimes can eat rocks too, which somehow makes Mukoda feel worse for his cookware. The little guy starts eating trash like it's a buffet until it tries to swallow the frying pan, and Mukoda has to intervene. Still, he's weirdly happy that it's cleaning up for him, and when he praises it, the slime practically vibrates with joy. Fel then drops the bomb that it's now Mukoda's familiar. Mukoda is confused since he never made a contract, but Fel explains that simply accepting its feelings was enough. Mukoda checks his stats and, sure enough, there it is. When told to give it a name, he decides on Sui. A few days later, Mukoda tries learning earth magic, but his best shot barely flicks a pebble. Fel suggests that real combat experience would help, but Mukoda, still traumatized from his last goblin chase, wants no part of it. Taking a break, he catches Sui trying to eat his bottle again and realizes the little slime is already bigger and up to level 8. He wonders if eating stuff from his world boosts stats like his cooking does. Fel gets hungry again, no surprise there, so Mukoda makes a hearty bowl of orc meat for both Fel and Sui. They all eat together, though Fel immediately demands seconds and even Sui wiggles for more. After dinner, Sui dissolves the food scraps off the dishes, which Mukoda finds surprisingly helpful. For dessert, he serves dorayaki filled with sweet red bean paste, and Sui loves it. Mukoda's just happy to see his little slime enjoy something that isn't trash. The next morning, Fel receives a message from the goddess and passes it along to Mukoda. The wind goddess Ninrir wants to bless him, but only if he offers sweets from the otherworld once a week. Fel says it won't be a full blessing, but even a minor one would grant immunity to all status ailments and boost magic. Mukoda thinks that's a steal and accepts instantly. Fel explains he can pray anywhere, even on a rock, as long as his heart's in it. For the first offering, Ninrir specifically requests dorayaki, cream bread, and melon bread. Mukoda can't believe she's picky about snacks, but he complies. The sweets vanish, and he receives her blessing. Somewhere in the heavens, Ninrir is devouring those sweets like it's her cheat day, overwhelmed by their softness and sweetness. She drinks some coffee Mukoda sent, instantly realizing it pairs perfectly, then eats the rest of the sweets she promised to save for later. Back on Earth, Mukoda's training improves. He's firing stones faster and stronger. Sui's already level 13, and Mukoda starts wondering if it might evolve someday. He keeps practicing until his mana runs out and snacks on some chocolate to recover, even sharing a piece with Sui. When Fel returns, he catches them eating without him and suddenly claims he's tired and needs some chocolate too. Mukoda doesn't buy it, but Fel insists that carrying him around all day is exhausting. Then, out of nowhere, Mukoda receives another divine message. Turns out, Ninrir just wants more chocolate. He points out that it hasn't even been a week since her last offering, but she doesn't care. He sends her the chocolate anyway, and Fel immediately announces it's time to go. Mukoda's suspicious, but Fel's expression says everything. Before he knows it, they're standing at the entrance of a dungeon. Mukoda asks why, and Fel says it's for training. Mukoda tries to run, but Fel drags him back, assuring him there are only weak monsters inside. Mukoda doesn't buy it for a second. Fel reminds him that he needs to get stronger in case he's ever alone, and Mukoda reluctantly agrees, but only after preparing a feast first. He cooks up a spread of otherworld food, explaining that it gives temporary stat boosts. Fel remembers feeling stronger after eating Wagyu steak and watches eagerly as Mukoda taste tests everything. His stats actually start climbing, and even Sui's go up. Fel is convinced they're ready for battle, but Mukoda still isn't. When they finally enter, Mukoda nervously asks Fel to cast a barrier. Fel starts pushing him forward until Mukoda stumbles into a slime, which Sui immediately melts with acid. Fel's impressed and calls Sui unique. Then a few more slimes show up, and Mukoda manages to stun one while Sui finishes it off. Next come horned rabbits charging straight at him, and Mukoda panics, swinging his sword like a madman but somehow survives. On the next floor, they face kobolds. This time, Mukoda lands a clean stone shot and takes down 2 of them. He's feeling proud, but Fel reminds him not to get cocky. Fired up, Mukoda decides he wants to get even stronger. They reach the final floor, where Fel warns there should be about 10 kobolds, but there are way more. Mukoda wants to bail, but Fel pushes him forward again. With Sui by his side, Mukoda fights his way through. Mukoda doesn't buy a single word Fel says about the dungeon being safe. But Sui, ever the enthusiastic blob, is practically bouncing with excitement. Before Mukoda can even protest, Fel gives him a firm kick forward, and suddenly every kobold in the room turns to look right at him. Mukoda freezes in terror as the pack charges, but thankfully, Fel's barrier blocks the attacks. Sui leaps into action, firing acid like an adorable little cannon, while Mukoda panics his way through casting earth magic. Somehow, he manages to take out a few kobolds before more rush at him, forcing him to shoot stones from both hands like he's trying to win a carnival game. Between his flailing magic and Sui's relentless acid attacks, they actually manage to wipe out most of the horde. Just when Mukoda thinks it's finally over, the remaining kobolds are suddenly sent flying as their boss, the massive Kobold King, appears. Mukoda is horrified, barely dodging its first swing. He fires stone bullets as fast as he can, but they just bounce off the beast like pebbles. Fel calmly mentions that his barrier might not hold if Mukoda actually gets hit, which is his way of saying, don't mess up. Mukoda fires even faster, landing a direct hit to the monster's head with a powerful stone blast, but the king just shakes it off like it was a light tap. As Mukoda scrambles to attack again, he runs out of mana. The king charges and the barrier flares up, stopping the blow cold. That's when Fel casually admits he lied earlier. His barrier was never going to break from such a weak attack. Mukoda doesn't have time to yell at him though, because Sui jumps in, launches a blast of acid, and completely melts the Kobold King into goo. Before Mukoda can even react, Sui starts glowing, and Mukoda promptly faints from exhaustion. Fel carries him out of the dungeon while Sui anxiously wiggles beside him. Then, to Fel's surprise, Sui suddenly speaks for the first time. The little slime is overjoyed and can't wait to talk to Mukoda when he wakes up. Fel agrees to keep him company, and Sui affectionately calls him Uncle Fel. Fel immediately regrets all his life choices, insisting he's not an uncle, but Sui insists that he's big, strong, and always taking care of them, so he must be one. Fel looks proud for half a second before snapping out of it, denying the title again. He leaves to grab a snack, but returns just to remind Sui to stay inside his barrier. Naturally, Sui just calls him Uncle Fel again. When Mukoda finally wakes up, he panics for a moment before realizing he's safe. Sui excitedly greets him, talking, and Mukoda nearly faints again, this time from shock. Sui explains that after they defeated the Kobold King, he somehow gained the ability to speak. He calls Mukoda Master, melting his heart instantly. Mukoda checks Sway's stats and finds out his little slime has leveled up and gained a new skill, Acid Bullet. Then he checks his own stats and sees he's gained 4 levels and now officially knows Earth Magic. Fel returns, acting like nothing happened, and Mukoda asks where he went. Fel admits he got hungry while Mukoda was unconscious and went hunting, though he claims he'd rather have Mukoda's cooking. He even demands food as a reward for helping Mukoda train. Mukoda is still mad about the whole lying about the barrier thing, but he gives in and cooks anyway. He makes a delicious dish with eggs and leftover rockbird, and of course, Fel devours it in record time while praising the flavor. Sui loves it too, which makes Mukoda beam with pride. Mukoda asks if Fel and Sway have been chatting while he was out, and Sway happily says he talked a lot with Uncle Fel. Mukoda bursts out laughing at the name, while Fel looks like he's about to combust from embarrassment. Mukoda keeps teasing him, pointing out that compared to Sui, who's only 2 weeks old, Fel is definitely uncle material. Fel yells, Sway starts crying, and Mukoda calls him mean, until Fel gives up and reluctantly allows Sway to keep the nickname. As they travel, Fel mentions they'll be passing through Orthros and Griffin territory. Mukoda nearly chokes on air when he realizes those are both extremely dangerous zones. Fel insists they'll be fine since nothing can touch him, but Mukoda begs him to take the long route. Too late. They're already in Orthros territory. The sound of growls fills the forest, and soon a pack of twin-headed wolves appears. Fel releases his intimidation aura, instantly sending most of them running, except for one young, cocky wolf who wants to fight. Fel tells Mukoda to hang back with Sway and gives the Orthros a final warning. The beast ignores it and lunges only for Fel to destroy it in one slash. The other wolves scatter in terror. Mukoda, still processing what he just witnessed, asks about that attack, and Fel proudly explains it's a technique he invented 600 years ago. Sway, inspired, wonders if he can learn it too. Mukoda gently tells him that it might be hard since he doesn't exactly have claws, but praises his acid bullet skill. Fel immediately looks jealous, which makes Mukoda grin. That night, they set up camp, though Mukoda's still tense about the forest. Fel assures him the Orthros learned their lesson, then promptly demands dinner. Mukoda sighs and starts cooking, realizing he's spoiling these two. He asks how long it'll take to cross the forest, and when Fel says they're only halfway through, Mukoda almost faints again. Deciding to make the best of it, he cooks some black serpent meat, which supposedly tastes like chicken. He preps it with sugar, sake, and a spicy chili sauce, frying it up until it smells amazing. Nervous but hungry, he takes a bite, and it's delicious. Fel immediately steals the plate, declaring it incredible and demanding more. Later, they come across glowing mushrooms that Fel says can heal the body. Mukoda starts collecting them, and Sway eats a few, glowing brightly before stopping. Worried, Mukoda uses his appraisal skill and discovers that Sway has gained a new ability to make healing potions. Fel is stunned, admitting he's never seen a slime do that before. Mukoda proudly asks Sway to try it, and the little slime produces a high-quality potion right from his body. Mukoda bottles it up, thrilled with the result, and praises Sway endlessly. They continue their journey and soon enter Griffin territory. A massive griffin lands in front of them, and Mukoda nearly passes out again. The griffin, however, speaks politely and asks Fel for a duel to prove his worth as a leader. Fel agrees, though Mukoda quietly begs him not to kill the poor thing. The fight begins. Fel kicks the griffin. The griffin retaliates with feathers, and soon the entire area is filled with wind and dust. Then Fel casually summons a tornado, shredding the battlefield. Mukoda yells for him to stop, and Fel finally ends it. The griffin is badly injured, but Mukoda rushes in with Sway and uses a healing potion to save him. The griffin, humbled but alive, feels ashamed of losing until Mukoda points out that he actually managed to wound Fel first in a long time. Fel reluctantly admits it. The griffin calls out to his flock, who arrive and accept him as their leader. As thanks, he gifts Mukoda a feather, promising that no griffin will ever harm his descendants. That night, Fel demands a mountain of meat to replenish energy, and Mukoda reluctantly cooks up the last of their orc meat. Everyone eats happily, and even Mukoda finally gives in and enjoys it. Later, Fel reminds him about his weekly offering to the goddess. Mukoda freezes, he completely forgot. Meanwhile, Minrir waits impatiently in heaven. When Mukoda finally remembers and prays, she scolds him mercilessly until he apologizes, and offers an assortment of Western desserts. Her anger immediately melts away as she devours the sweets, falling in love with the cake and demanding the same amount next time. With that done, the group finally leaves the forest and approaches the kingdom of Leonhardt. Mukoda mentions they should head to the guild to restock on meat, which instantly grabs Fel's attention. Before they can get far, they spot a caravan being attacked by bandits. Fel doesn't waste a second. By the time Mukoda and Sui catch up, the caravan is in chaos, bandits everywhere, shouting, blades clashing. Then Fel arrives and lets out a roar so loud it could shatter confidence itself. Everyone freezes. He tells the bandits to surrender or face the consequences, and unsurprisingly, they all drop their weapons like kids caught stealing snacks. The situation wraps up fast after that. The caravan leader, Lambert, and an adventurer captain named Lars step forward, both clearly relieved and equally shocked to realize this is the Fel, the giant wolf from all the rumors. Mukoda, awkward as ever, asks where they're headed, and Lambert explains they're traveling to the city of Carolina. Since Mukoda and his crew are new to the region, he politely asks to tag along, which Lambert agrees to immediately. After all, having a mythical beast for company sounds like a pretty solid insurance policy. As they travel, Mukoda overhears the guards debating whether Fel is a Fenrir or just a really big great wolf. Mukoda is horrified to realize how far the rumors have spread. Apparently, guilds have been sending letters through magical teleportation tools, so the whole continent probably knows about them by now. He tries to laugh it off, but inside, he's panicking. The last thing he needs is someone discovering his item storage and online shop skills. Nobles especially would drool over that kind of magic, and Mukoda would rather not end up as someone's pet magician. When night falls, the caravan sets up camp, and Fel reminds Mukoda loudly that he promised him a special meal. The guards settle for their usual jerky while Mukoda wanders off to cook in peace. Fel demands an obscene amount of meat as usual, but when Sui asks sweetly for some too, Mukoda's mood instantly softens. He's out of steaks, so he gathers whatever meat he has left and decides to make something grand. He coats it in flour and seasons it to perfection before frying it up, creating something dangerously close to fried chicken. Sui is amazed by the crispy texture and the fact that there are two flavors, while Fel devours his share like a vacuum with fur. It doesn't take long for the rest of the caravan to notice the smell. The guards drift closer, trying not to stare, until Mukoda sighs and offers them a taste. One bite, and they're hooked. They start showering him with praise, calling it the best food they've ever had, while Mukoda just keeps cooking and cooking until he's running on fumes. The guards insist he rest while they take night watch, but the bandits in captivity start mouthing off again. Mukoda simply warns them that if they try anything, Fel will use them as midnight snacks. The threat works instantly. The next morning, they arrive in Carolina, a bustling trade city that Lambert proudly describes as the 5th largest in the kingdom. His family has been leather merchants there for generations. The bandits are turned over to the knights. Lars heads to the guild for his report, and Mukoda plans to do the same. He promises Lambert he'll visit his shop later before heading inside the guild. Unfortunately, things don't go smoothly. The clerk informs him that his guild card has been deactivated. Apparently, he didn't complete enough quests last month. Mukoda mentally reviews all the chaos he survived and can't believe that doesn't count. The clerk kindly explains that most people rush to F rank to avoid that issue, since their time limit extends to 3 months. So, Mukoda re-registers and casually mentions that he now has 2 familiars. When he shows off Sui, the clerk stares at the tiny slime, unimpressed, while a few adventurers nearby laugh. Mukoda tries to ignore them. He heads over to the guild butcher to sell the monsters Fel caught, but Lars and his group spot him and tag along, curious to see his haul. Mukoda hesitates, then opens his storage, and everyone freezes. The sheer variety and size of the monsters inside leave even the butcher speechless. The man's eyes light up like it's his birthday as he starts working on the red serpent, explaining that its meat is so rare, most commoners will never even see it. Fel and Sui drool in anticipation while Lars suddenly realizes what they were eating last night. When Mukoda casually lists rockbird, giant deer, and orc meat, Lars and his team instantly apologize for underestimating him. Mukoda just laughs it off, saying he has plenty to spare. Lars, now thoroughly impressed, tells him to reach out anytime he needs help in Carolina. That night, Mukoda finally finds an inn and collapses on the bed. thinking about how to reach F rank so he can keep using the butcher's services. He's not exactly thrilled about adventurer life, but before he can think too hard, he hears Ninrir's voice echo in his head, complaining that he's forgotten about her again. Mukoda panics, opens his shop, and starts offering her sweets, jelly, pudding, the works. She forgives him immediately, fascinated by the pudding's wobble, until the other goddesses take notice of the treats and start whispering among themselves. The next day, Mukoda visits the guild board. Each quest earns points depending on difficulty. Herb gathering is worth 1, goblin hunting is worth 3, and he needs 100 to level up. Fel votes for goblin hunting, claiming it'll help them grow stronger faster, but Mukoda flatly refuses after remembering his last goblin experience. Fel mentions seafood, saying they need to reach the ocean soon, and Mukoda knows where this is going. Fel turns to Sway, asking his opinion, and of course, Sway wants to fight goblins. Mukoda tries to convince him to go herb collecting instead, but the little slime proudly says he can already make medicine. Mukoda sighs, gives in, and accepts the goblin quest. In the forest, Sway wipes out 3 goblins effortlessly with his acid bullets, but Mukoda's real struggle begins. He has to cut off their right ears as proof. He's horrified, claiming it's completely different from butchering meat for cooking. Fel disagrees and mocks him, which leads to Mukoda ranting loudly enough to attract an entire horde of goblins. Sway blasts them all into puddles, but Fel insists they keep going until the whole camp is cleared. Mukoda tries to refuse, but between Fel's force and Sway's excitement, he's dragged along for the massacre. By the end, Sway's thrilled, Fel's proud, and Mukoda's mentally scarred, standing in a field of melted goblins with a bag full of ears and a soul in desperate need of therapy. Mukoda tells Sway to melt down the goblin corpses, expecting a quick cleanup. Instead, Sway starts trembling like a water balloon about to burst and suddenly grows to an enormous size. Mukoda stares in disbelief as the once hand-sized slime now towers over him, and before he can even process what's happening, Sway starts shaking again, then splits into dozens of smaller slimes. Mukoda now has a whole army of bubbly little cleaners happily dissolving the entire pile of goblins. Even Fel, who's seen his share of strange things, pauses for a moment to admire the spectacle. When it's over, Mukoda can't help but wonder just how powerful Sway will eventually become. Back at the guild, the staff practically lose their minds when they see the number of goblin ears Mukoda turns in. He's immediately summoned to meet the guild master, Willem, and naturally starts to worry he's in trouble again. But Willem simply wants to confirm the unbelievable report that Mukoda and his familiars wiped out an entire goblin settlement. Mukoda admits it hesitantly, and Willem looks equal parts impressed and relieved. Then he reveals a royal message. The king has decided that Mukoda and his companions are free to live in the country however they please, but the palace would appreciate their help in times of national crisis. Mukoda can hardly believe his luck. Finally, no nobles breathing down his neck or trying to recruit him for their political games. Willem admits that just having a legendary beast like Fel in their borders is enough to make enemy nations think twice about attacking. Since Mukoda's trying to raise his rank anyway, Willem decides to help. Using his authority as guildmaster, he promotes Mukoda straight to C rank. Mukoda's jaw practically hits the floor. Willem explains that having the master of a legendary beast listed as a low-rank adventurer would cause endless paperwork and panic, so this is just simplifying things. Willem has a few requests in exchange, but when Mukoda hears the word work, his enthusiasm plummets. Then Willem clarifies that he actually wants Fel's help for some A and S rank missions problems, too dangerous for normal adventurers. Fel's ears perk up immediately, declaring that he can handle any mission they throw his way. Willem grins, thrilled to finally have someone capable on call, and assures Mukoda that he'll make sure no one in the guild bothers them. Mukoda decides Willem seems trustworthy enough, so he opens his item box and reveals his collection of high-ranked monsters he's been keeping secret. Willem and the butcher are both stunned. The butcher looks like a kid at a candy store, practically drooling over the rare materials, and nearly faints when he spots the chimera. Mukoda explains he didn't sell them earlier because he didn't want to cause a scene, but he'd like to offload them now. Unfortunately, Willem admits the guild can't even afford to buy a single chimera. The butcher points out the blue ogre and excitedly explains that it's a unique S-ranked monster. Then he notices the Orc King, another S-rank beast with the ability to command all other orcs. Mukoda is horrified to realize just how many S-ranked creatures Fel has casually slaughtered. Sui pops out and proudly announces that he wants to become strong like Fel someday, which makes Mukoda very nervous about what that might look like. Willem tells him to come back tomorrow for his new adventurer card. That evening, Mukoda decides to make something lighter for dinner since they've been deep frying everything lately. He boils rockbird meat, shreds it up, mixes in some vegetables, and drizzles it all with sesame dressing. Fel looks skeptical because vegetables, but ends up devouring the entire dish. Sui loves it even more, claiming the sauce is amazing. Mukoda realizes he forgot to cook rice, so he makes himself a sandwich instead, and Fel immediately demands a bite, then seconds. After eating, Fel sprawls out to rest, but Mukoda notices it's a bit cramped indoors compared to camping. He takes out his futon for Fel, who instantly falls asleep, snoring like a very content thunderstorm. The next morning, Mukoda heads back to the guild and receives his shiny new silver card. He now has a 6-month grace period to complete missions, meaning no more accidental deactivations. Willem also tallies up the value of the monsters Mukoda sold. The red serpent alone brings in 200 gold, and the blue ogre another 432. After including the goblin subjugation reward, Mukoda walks away with over 1,900 gold in total. He's thrilled for about 2 seconds before paranoia kicks in, realizing that kind of wealth could make him a prime target. Willem then explains the 2 high-level missions he wants help with, subjugating a group of metal lizards whose armored hides are nearly indestructible, and hunting down a herd of bloody-horned bulls terrorizing a beginner's hunting ground. Fel immediately perks up at the mention of bulls, declaring that they sound delicious and fantasizing about fresh steak. As they leave the guild, Mukoda suggests resting for the night before heading out, but Fel argues that the sooner they go, the sooner he gets his steak. Mukoda insists that arriving in the middle of the night is a terrible idea, but Fel just huffs impatiently. On the way back, Mukoda stops by Lambert's shop to buy a new bag, one specifically for Sui. Lambert proudly shows him a selection of high-quality leather bags, and Mukoda lets Sui pick his favorite. The little slime bounces happily toward one made of red boar leather. Mukoda also buys a belt and a new pair of shoes, resisting the urge to use his online shop to avoid drawing attention. When Lambert rings up the total 11 gold, he waves it off and insists Mukoda take everything for free as thanks for saving his life and serving him such incredible food. As they chat, Lambert mentions the black serpent meat they'd eaten before and asks if Mukoda still has the skin. Mukoda says he sold it to the guild, which disappoints Lambert, who explains that serpent leather is in short supply and he's been dreaming of getting his hands on red serpent skin someday. Feeling a bit guilty, Mukoda promises that if he ever gets more, he'll sell it directly to Lambert. After they leave, Fel starts craving serpent meat just from the conversation. Mukoda remembers how good it was and decides that, fine, maybe one more round won't hurt. He marinates the meat, fries it up, and sneaks a taste, only for Fel and Sui to immediately complain that he started eating without them. He quickly fries up the rest, this time double frying it for extra crispiness, and when they dig in, they both agree it's even better than before. Completely stuffed, Fel groans that he can't eat another bite, while Mukoda casually keeps cooking, saying, "The rest is for later." With the leftovers safely stored away, Mukoda finally sits back with a cold beer, watching Fel and Sui sleep peacefully beside him. Mukoda and Fel make their way toward the mountains, following the reports of metal lizards causing trouble. Mukoda, as usual, prefers the idea of standing safely outside while Fel goes in, but that plan doesn't last long because Fel decides charging into danger headfirst is apparently his hobby now. Inside the cave, they find one lizard glowing like a disco ball, which turns out to be a mithril lizard, a creature so rare that even Fel raises an eyebrow. Mithril diffuses magic, so Mukoda assumes this will be a tough fight, but Fel just fries the thing with lightning in a single hit. Turns out, his magic doesn't follow normal rules. Mukoda pays his respects to the fallen lizard and starts collecting mithril ore like he's found treasure, dreaming about custom armor and shiny new weapons. Fel immediately ruins the fantasy by crushing a chunk of mithril, saying he doesn't need armor when his barrier is way better anyway. Bored and hungry for his next steak, Fel drags Mukoda along for the next mission. They arrive at the fields where the bloody horned bulls roam, enormous and angry enough to make even Mukoda nervous. He He plans to stay out of the way, but Fel charges in, followed by an overexcited Sway who doesn't want to miss out. One explosion later, the entire herd is down, leaving Mukoda wondering why he even worries anymore. Sway proudly reports the victory, and Fel actually gives him a compliment, which for him is high praise. Mukoda starts storing away the mountain of bulls, already planning all the beef dishes he'll be making later. Back in town, when Willem and the butcher see the mithril lizard, they nearly lose it. Apparently, it's so rare that the last one was spotted 4 centuries ago, and it signals the location of a new mithril mine. There are only 3 in the entire world, so Mukoda's little side quest has basically changed the economy. Willem tells him the lizard has to be handed over to the king but assures him he'll be compensated, roughly 5,000 gold worth. Mukoda freezes at the number, realizing his quiet, peaceful life just got a lot harder to maintain. Willem moves on to ask about the bulls, and Mukoda casually mentions that's done too, leaving both men speechless again. Fel couldn't care less about politics or gold, he just wants steak. Mukoda gives in and starts cooking, cutting thick slices of meat and searing them to perfection. Fel and Sway wait impatiently, drooling as the smell fills the air. The steak is tender, juicy, and dripping with flavor, and even Fel admits it rivals Wagyu. Mukoda adds some of his favorite sauce, and soon the two of them are in food heaven, declaring they might never go back to raw meat again. Just when Mukoda thinks he can finally relax, Fel reminds him about the offerings for Ninrir. Mukoda panics, rushes to send her sweets, and immediately gets a chorus of goddesses complaining that she's hogging all the desserts. They start offering him blessings just to get their share. Mukoda tries to politely decline, but apparently, no isn't an option when dealing with divine sugar addicts. By the time they're done arguing, he somehow collected multiple blessings, and even Sui ends up with one from the water goddess who felt left out. Mukoda checks his status later and finds his power has skyrocketed. When he tests his magic, it's stronger, faster, and doesn't even tire him out anymore. Curious, he tells Sui to try his new blessing too. Sway conjures a spinning orb of water, launches it at a tree, and sends it flying like it was made of paper. Mukoda watches, stunned. Mukoda can't help but be proud, though he immediately warns Sway not to use that blade trick on anyone in town. Fel, ever the battle junkie, suddenly wants to spar with Sway, declaring he's finally found a worthy opponent. Mukoda shuts it down, saying it's too soon, and Fel sulks like a kid who's been told to put the sword down at dinner. Mukoda moves on to testing his own magic, practicing with his new stonewall spell until Fel gets bored and wanders off hunting. By the time he returns, Mukoda is proudly showing off a small house he built using earth magic. Fel looks at it, unimpressed, but Mukoda is clearly thrilled with his handiwork. Fel drops a black serpent at his feet, saying he caught it for Lambert. Mukoda suspects there's an ulterior motive, and of course there is. Fel just wants to be rewarded with a special dinner. The next morning, Fel admits Mukoda's earth hut was actually pretty comfortable, but immediately starts talking about hunting again. Mukoda refuses, saying they should go deliver the serpent instead. They head to the guild, where Mukoda meets the butcher to collect payment for all the bull meat. When Mukoda casually pulls out another black serpent, the butcher nearly faints, wondering how he keeps finding them. Sway pops out asking if it's lunchtime, and Mukoda, more excited than usual, reveals his latest purchase, a meat grinder. He starts grinding the bull meat, then the pork, mixing them together with eggs and onions to make perfect patties. Sui insists on helping, completely fascinated by the grinder. Soon enough, they're frying up hamburger steaks with Mukoda's special sauce. Fel devours his portion instantly, declaring it one of Mukoda's best creations yet. After the meal, Mukoda tries washing his clothes, but the soap here barely does anything. That's when inspiration strikes. He can sell soap and shampoo from his online shop. He transfers the bottles into plain containers so it doesn't look suspicious, and later takes them to Lambert. Lambert inspects the products, finding the scent pleasant and the texture luxurious. Before Mukoda can even explain, Lambert's eyes well up with tears. His wedding anniversary is coming up, and his wife already owns every bag and accessory he's ever made. But this is perfect. Mukoda asks about a bathtub, and Lambert proudly explains that he had one custom made for his wife, complete with a purification device and earth magic shaping. It cost hundreds of gold, which for a merchant is basically a status symbol. Mukoda's jaw drops. He's already picturing his own bath. Lambert offers to introduce him to the craftsman, and Mukoda nearly hugs him out of gratitude. The next day, when Mukoda visits again, Lambert's wife, Marie, comes rushing out to meet him. She's glowing with excitement, saying she tried the shampoo and conditioner after Lambert's bath, and now her hair is softer than ever. Lambert looks guilty for ruining the surprise, but Marie doesn't care. She wants more. She insists that Mukoda sell the products to them wholesale so they can sell them in their shop, convinced every woman in the city will want them. Mukoda agrees, happy to offload the work, and Marie looks absolutely delighted, already thinking about her personal stash. After delivering a batch of products, Mukoda is exhausted and just wants to rest, but Fel decides now is the perfect time to go dungeon hunting. Mukoda refuses, saying he has to meet the guildmaster. While waiting outside, he overhears adventurers talking about a stray wyvern nearby and starts getting nervous. When he enters Willem's office, he's immediately blinded by a massive pile of gold, over 5,800 pieces, payment for discovering the mithril mine. Mukoda can only think about finally buying that bathtub. But before he can start celebrating, an emergency breaks out. A herd of wyverns is heading straight for the city. Apparently, since Mukoda wiped out the bloody horned bulls, the wyverns' usual prey, the creatures decided to take their frustration out on humans. The guild is in chaos. Adventurers are injured, some poisoned, and the supply of potions is almost gone. Without hesitation, Mukoda pulls out his high-grade potions. One dose completely heals a man's wounds and neutralizes the poison on the spot, leaving everyone speechless. Willem regains his composure and orders all adventurers ranked C and above to help fight, which, unfortunately, includes Mukoda. Before he can protest, Fel steps forward and announces that he and Sway will handle it themselves. Mukoda wants to crawl under a table, but Fel insists, declaring all the wyverns they defeat will be theirs to eat. Willem tries to argue, but Fel waves him off like a nuisance. Out in the field, the wyverns fill the sky. Mukoda can barely breathe from the tension, but Fel sees it as a training opportunity for Sway. As the wyverns dive, Fel tells Sway to aim for their heads, though the wings are easier targets. Sway fires his water bullets, knocking one out of the air, and Fel finishes it effortlessly. Mukoda hides behind a rock, muttering to himself about how his team seems more terrifying. As he watches Fel and Sway fight, Mukoda can't help but think Sway is starting to act a lot like Fel, always itching for a good brawl. Before he can finish that thought, a wyvern swoops down on him, but Fel's barrier flares up just in time. The creature tries again, only to be smacked away by Swee and finished off by Fel like it's nothing. Once all the wyverns are dealt with, Fel immediately gets hungry, because of course he does. Mukoda takes out some patties he made earlier, and Fel complains they're eating the same thing again. But Mukoda, being the culinary genius he is, coats them in egg and breadcrumbs. One quick fry later, and suddenly everyone's shocked at how much better it tastes. Who knew a little crunch could be life-changing? Meanwhile, back at the guild, Willem and the adventurers are busy worrying if Mukoda even survived. But when Mukoda strolls in casually and reports that they wiped out every single wyvern, the adventurers celebrate like they just won the lottery. Mukoda finds it odd, but Willem explains that if they had gone themselves, at least half of them wouldn't be coming back. He reports that there were 13 wyverns in total, and Willem is eager to buy their parts. Mukoda sells everything except the meat priorities after all, but the guild only has enough gold to buy half. Later at the inn, Mukoda suddenly remembers he still hasn't sent offerings to the goddesses. And right on cue, Agni sends him a divine message, basically yelling at him to hurry up. When he starts preparing the offerings, Nenri sends a secret message reminding him she was the first to bless him, so obviously she deserves more sweets than the others. Keisha wants shampoo and hair products, Ruka asks for more food, and Mukoda sighs because he can't keep any of this secret. They'll all see what he sends. Agni overhears everything, gets jealous, and demands alcohol. At this point, Mukoda just gives up and agrees to everything. The next day, Mukoda and Fel are drawing stairs everywhere they go, being the new wyvern slayers in town. They visit a shop selling bathtubs, and Mukoda is amazed at the variety, each one made with different materials that supposedly have special effects. The clerk proudly presents their newest model, which just looks like a normal tub, but Mukoda picks the green one without hesitation. The clerk is stunned. Most people would need a payment plan, but Mukoda casually drops the gold and tells him he'll handle the delivery himself. The man's jaw practically hits the floor when Mukoda explains he'll just store it in his magic inventory. Outside, Mukoda decides it's time to leave town before the attention gets worse. They find a quiet spot, and Fel heads off to hunt while Mukoda sets up a private area with his stone wall skill. He takes out the tub, asks Sway to fill it with water, then heats it with a fireball. After scrubbing himself down, he finally sinks into the bath with Sway, sighing like a man who has just remembered what peace feels like. When they're done, Mukoda starts cooking wyvern meat, slicing it thin and making a rich sauce for a special wyvern beef bowl. But since Fel hasn't returned, he decides to make some stew too, something hearty and slow cooked. He browns the meat, adds vegetables, wine and sauce, and lets it simmer. Then Swee suddenly says, "Fel's back," and a massive dinosaur step into view. Mukoda stares in disbelief as Fel casually explains he got bored after the wyverns and went off to fight an earth dragon. Mukoda can't decide if he's more terrified or exhausted. Fel insists it'll be delicious, while Mukoda reminds him that extremely rare monsters usually can't be sold. A dragon definitely falls into that category. But Fel just suggests asking the guild to resell it for him, and Mukoda, already resigned to his fate, decides maybe that isn't the worst idea after all. Fel spots the pot of stew simmering on the fire and immediately gets excited, ready to dive in. But Mukoda stops him, telling him he's filthy after his fight. Fel looks genuinely offended that anyone would dare call him dirty. Mukoda insists he needs a bath before dinner, and Fel looks horrified, like he just got told he has to pay taxes. Still, Mukoda's determined. He buys some grooming tools from his online shop, and Fel grumbles that he's not a dog. Mukoda ignores him and starts brushing through his fur, carefully untangling it while Fel huffs in protest. When Mukoda splashes him with warm water, Fel flinches but immediately denies it. Mukoda keeps splashing him anyway, and Fel squirms, saying it tickles. Fel even suggests letting Sway handle it with water magic, but Mukoda points out that Sway's water isn't warm. That gives him an idea, and he turns Sway into a makeshift shower head, running hot water straight over Fel's back. Completely drenched, Fel finally gives in and lets Mukoda shampoo him. Once the scrubbing starts, Fel starts to enjoy it, even if he won't admit it out loud. Then Mukoda casually says it's time to wash his face, and Fel freezes. The idea terrifies him, but since he's a legendary Fenrir, he forces himself to act tough and lets it happen. When it's all done, Mukoda grabs a towel, but before he can use it, Fel shakes his entire body, sending water everywhere. They end up using a mix of Fel's wind magic and Mukoda's fire magic to create a warm breeze, drying him off completely. Fel immediately demands dinner like it was all part of the plan. They start with the special wyvern beef bowls, and Fel is blown away by how good it tastes. Mukoda's surprised too, realizing wyvern meat tastes a lot like wagyu. As they eat, Mukoda tells Fel he needs to start bathing regularly. Fel looks horrified again, but when Swee cheerfully tells him he looks better now, Fel reluctantly agrees. Then they try the wyvern stew, and Fel can't believe how good it is. Back at the guild, Willem tells Mukoda it's impossible to resell the dragon. The butcher refuses to even touch it, saying every part of the dragon is too valuable to process. Fel just wants the meat, but Mukoda reminds him it's not that simple. Willem thinks for a moment and mentions a certain dragon expert who might be able to help. Mukoda and Fel both perk up, and Willem points out the city where the expert lives. When Fel hears it's near the sea, he gets excited again, dreaming about eating krakens and other sea monsters. Willem and the butcher laugh at the absurdity, but deep down, they know he's probably serious. Mukoda says his farewells to everyone they've met along the way, and together, he, Fel, and Sway set off for their next adventure. The story shifts to a quiet forest, where a venom tarantula is crouched low, waiting to ambush a rabbit. It looks ready to strike, until Fel, the mighty wolf god, casually taps his paw on the ground. That single, effortless tap sends a thunderous wave of energy through the forest, frying not only the ambusher, but a few more venom tarantulas hiding nearby. Job done. No drama, no effort. The only reason he even bothered? Apparently, he wants to see if spider meat makes a decent lunch. Mukoda, being the reasonable human here, isn't exactly thrilled about that idea, but Fel insists that once you peel off the shells, they're perfectly edible. Just then, Swee pops out of Mukoda's bag, excitedly bouncing around. She hasn't fought anything in a while and wants in on the next battle. Mukoda, ever the gentle soul, promises she'll get her chance next time. Fel, on the other hand, doesn't take that well. Apparently, he's jealous that Mukoda is being soft with Sway, but never listens to him. Which isn't true. Mukoda has been following Fel's orders since day one, whether he likes it or not. Still, Fel immediately shifts gears and demands lunch, claiming he's exhausted from running all day with Mukoda and Sway on his back. Mukoda knows it's just another excuse for a meal, but he's used to it. He sighs, stores the fried spider bodies in his magical inventory, and gets to work. Out come 3 types of meat: ribeye on the left, sirloin in the middle, and some ground orc meat on the right. Then, reality hits. He's short on ingredients. But Mukoda, being Mukoda, he improvises. He decides to make gyoza, a kind of dumpling. He opens his online grocery store because, yes, that's still a thing in this fantasy world, and scrolls for supplies. Fel spots Wagyu beef and instantly wants it, but Mukoda shuts him down. He's not about to waste money on luxury beef for dumplings. He grabs what he needs instead: gyoza wraps, chicken stock, and sesame oil. The rest, he already has. Back in the camp, he finally chops cabbage and chives, then adds garlic and ginger paste to the minced meat. A splash of soy sauce, a bit of sake, some broth powder, sesame oil, salt, and pepper. It's a simple but perfect mix. Once everything's blended, he adds in the veggies, lays a spoonful of the filling on each dough circle, and wraps them neatly. Sui joins in to help, but her first few attempts don't go too well. Mukoda patiently explains that she's just using too much filling. Once she gets the hang of it, she starts folding dumplings like a pro. They finish the batch, and Mukoda pan-fries the gyoza until they're beautifully golden. A bit of flour water goes in, then a lid, and when the steam settles, he drizzles sesame oil around the edges for that perfect crisp. The smell alone could make anyone's stomach growl. Fel and Sui dive in the moment he serves the plate, and as usual, they're blown away. Fel demands seconds. Sui does too. Mukoda just sighs and makes another batch, saving a few for himself. But just as he's about to take his first bite, something small and winged crashes into his face. Mukoda ends up giving the little dragon the rest of his own lunch. Watching the tiny thing devour gyoza after gyoza, he can't help but comment on how cute it is. Fel, of course, immediately ruins the moment by warning him not to fall for it. According to him, pixie dragons might look adorable, but they're vicious, magical little beasts that shouldn't be underestimated. And before Mukoda can even process that warning, the dragon leaps straight back onto his face again, and this time, something strange happens. A bright light flares, and just like that, a contract is formed. The pixie dragon has officially made Mukoda its master. Against his will, naturally. Now bonded, Mukoda can understand what the dragon is saying, and the first thing he asks is why on earth it decided to form a contract without permission. The dragon, completely unapologetic, explains that it's simple. It just wants to eat more delicious food. Sui finds that perfectly reasonable and welcomes the dragon to their team without hesitation. The new member quickly introduces himself to both Sui and Fel, fitting right in, while Mukoda stands there wondering when he stopped being the decision-maker in his own life. Of course, the next step is naming the dragon. Mukoda, who has a history of questionable naming skills, proudly calls him Dora-chan. It's cute, sure, but also painfully embarrassing for a creature that's over 100 years old. Unfortunately for Dora, the contract system locks the name in before he can even complain. He's devastated, muttering about the humiliation of living a century only to end up with a name that sounds like something from a children's cartoon. Fel finds the whole thing hilarious and reassures him by pointing out that Mukoda once tried to name him Pochi. Sui chimes in sweetly, saying she loves her own name and that Dora will get used to his soon enough. Despite the teasing, Mukoda feels relieved seeing all 3 of them getting along so well. Together, they head toward Krail City, where Mukoda registers Dora officially as his 3rd familiar at the Adventurers Guild. While he's there, the receptionist informs him that the guildmaster wants to meet. The guildmaster, a stout dwarf named Rodolfo, explains the situation. Monsters in the nearby forest have been unusually aggressive, making it dangerous for people to gather materials there. The local economy depends on that forest, so he's hoping Mukoda can help investigate what's causing the disturbance. Mukoda immediately thinks this sounds like way too much responsibility, but before he can decline, Dora casually mentions that the forest is probably filled with spiders. That catches Mukoda's attention. He realizes Rodolfo must be talking about the same forest Fel cleared out earlier when he went on his thunder rampage against the venom tarantulas. Problem solved, before it was even assigned. Mukoda shows Rodolfo the spider corpses he collected, and when the guildmaster learns that their silk is used by local clothing businesses, Mukoda apologizes for accidentally wiping out something valuable. Rodolfo, however, is thrilled. He thanks Mukoda for taking down such dangerous creatures and even points out that their shells and webs can be sold for a small fortune. Apparently, the meat is edible too, if boiled in salt water. Mukoda is skeptical, but his 3 freeloaders insist he tries it. He strikes a deal with Rodolfo to process the meat in exchange for the shells and silk, and the dwarf happily agrees. While the meat gets handled, Mukoda and his team wander through the city. After surviving weeks of camping and spider hunting, Mukoda finally decides it's time to treat himself. One look at a clothing stall, and he's instantly in shopping mode. He picks out new shirts, trousers, and probably enough outfits to last a lifetime, all for someone who's still going to spend most of his time cooking in the wilderness. Mukoda returns to the guild, where Rodolfo proudly reveals that the spider meat has been fully processed and boiled. To Mukoda's utter disbelief, it looks exactly like crab meat, same texture, same color, everything. He's hesitant, but curiosity wins and he takes a bite. The moment it touches his tongue, his expression changes. It's delicious, sweet, rich, and bursting with umami. Feeling inspired, Mukoda decides to celebrate Dora's official welcome to the team with a proper meal. He goes all out, whipping up crab salad, crab fried rice, crab spring rolls, and even a crab omelet. It's a full seafood feast without any actual seafood. Everyone's drooling before the plates even hit the table. As they dig in, Mukoda gets a sudden craving for grilled crab. He picks up the spider legs, ugly, purple, and deeply unappetizing. But once they're boiled, they turn a rich, reddish color that looks almost normal. He grills them slowly, letting the juices caramelize, and just as he's about to take the first bite, Fel swoops in, accusing him of trying to eat it all alone. Dora and Sway join in, protesting loudly. Mukoda, completely defeated, hands over the precious grilled crab to his 3 freeloaders. While eating, Dora casually mentions how glad he is that he followed Mukoda. Confused, Mukoda asks what he means, and Dora explains that he first saw Mukoda back in Carolina City cooking something that smelled too good to ignore. He followed him, arrived at the nearby forest first, and accidentally scared every monster in it. Fel freezes mid-bite, realizing that the aggressive monsters from earlier weren't acting strange because of some natural disturbance. They were terrified of Dora, which means he basically wiped out an entire population of frightened spiders for nothing. Mukoda just sighs and says that, at this point, the only respectful thing they can do for the poor creatures is eat them thoroughly. That night, the exhausted F-rank adventurer finally gets a break. He takes a long bath with Sui splashing happily beside him, while Fel and Dora snore away with their stomachs full. Afterward, Mukoda crawls into bed, wondering what to do tomorrow. Somewhere between thoughts of errands and recipes, he drifts off to sleep, completely forgetting that he was supposed to make an offering to the 4 goddesses. Fortunately, the goddesses let it slide this time, allowing him a rare night of uninterrupted rest. The next morning, Mukoda heads back to the guild, hands Rodolfo the spider shells, and even gives him some leftover meat. Rodolfo gratefully accepts. Then Mukoda remembers something. He still has an entire earth dragon corpse sitting in his storage. He asks if Rodolfo knows anyone who can process it. The dwarf almost falls over in shock, explaining that the corpse alone is worth enough to buy an entire kingdom. But yes, he does know someone, Guildmaster Elend of Dungeon City Dolan, an expert in handling dragon materials. So, Mukoda and his 3 familiars set off for Dolan immediately. By the time they reach the outskirts, Fel is already excited about the idea of conquering whatever dungeons lie ahead. Sui bounces out of Mukoda's bag, eager to join in the next big fight. Mukoda, meanwhile, wants nothing to do with any dungeon. He'd rather cook than crawl through monster-infested caves. Dora agrees, saying their main goal should be meeting Guildmaster Ellen to get the dragon processed. That's all it takes for Fel to change priorities. Now he's obsessed with the idea of tasting earth dragon meat. Mukoda finds that suspicious, but before he can say anything, Fel bolts toward the city with everyone on his back. When they finally arrive at the city gates, they find a massive line. Naturally, Mukoda wants to wait like a decent human being, but Fel has other ideas, like jumping over the walls. Mukoda immediately shuts that down, pointing out that they'll all end up in jail if they try something that stupid. So, they get in line. Problem is, a divine beast standing quietly behind dozens of ordinary travelers tends to attract attention. People start panicking, whispering, and backing away. The guards rush over, demanding to know what's going on. When they see Fel, their tone changes instantly. They realize they're dealing with someone important. They ask Mukoda what his business is in Dolan, and he awkwardly explains that he's here to meet the guildmaster. To prove he's legitimate, he shows them his Adventurer's Guild card. Before the guards can say anything, a tall, blonde elf steps forward and declares that Mukoda is his guest. This elegant elf is none other than Elend, the guildmaster of Dolan. He's already heard plenty about Mukoda from Rodolfo and seems excited to meet him in person. But when his eyes fall on the small dragon perched on Mukoda's shoulder, he freezes in place, completely speechless. Once he recovers, he politely invites Mukoda and his companions to his office. Inside, Ellen gives Dora the royal treatment, offering him a special perch made from wood infused with pure mana. Dora, completely ignoring the luxury, plops down on the floor instead. Ellen is horrified, but also thrilled. He immediately scribbles down notes, documenting this rare behavioral insight. He even serves Dora a bowl of mana-infused flower nectar and watches him like a scientist observing a lab rat, waiting to see if he'll drink it. Dora, realizing he's being studied, turns away in silent protest. Ellen notes that down too. Apparently, official records claim pixie dragons live off mana and flower nectar, but Dora's reaction makes Ellen doubt those reports. Then, like a man possessed, he suddenly remembers why Mukoda is here to process the Earth Dragon. Overexcited, he jumps to his feet, ready to take them to the warehouse to inspect the corpse. A bald assistant appears at the door, reminding him that he has a meeting with the Merchants Guild that afternoon, and just like that, Mukoda's day gets a little more complicated. Elland would of course like to cancel this meeting since he needs to tend to his guests, but the man refuses to take no for an answer. Luckily, they still have some time, so they head to the warehouse where Mukoda casually brings out the Earth Dragon from his item box. The sight of this dinosaur-sized creature sends a chill straight down Elaland's spine. He makes this weird face that's somewhere between terrified and fascinated, and honestly, I can't even describe it. Anyway, after properly recording the dragon's physical data, Elaland once again asks Mukoda about the pixie dragon's diet. Mukoda explains that Dora eats pretty much everything while traveling with him, but still asks Dora directly if his species has any special preferences. Watching this silent exchange confuses Elaland, who has no clue that familiars can communicate telepathically. He's dying to ask for details, but before he can embarrass himself, the bald man beside him gently stops him and apologizes to Mukoda on his behalf. They move on, and before long, the overly excited and slightly mannerless guildmaster gets to work. Unfortunately, they learn that the processed dragon meat won't be ready until the next day. With nothing else to do, Mukoda decides to do what he does best, cook something. He quickly orders ingredients from the online grocery store and starts preparing a dish using a special dome-shaped pan called the Genghis Khan. I really hope the pot doesn't impregnate the ingredients because that name is concerning. Anyway, Mukoda fills the edges of the Genghis Khan with vegetables and places the meat right in the center. After adding some sauce and letting it cook for about 10 minutes, he completes the dish, otherworldly lamb and mutton Genghis Khan. Fel of course wants nothing to do with the vegetables. But after Mukoda insists, he reluctantly takes a bite and instantly falls in love. Dora and Sway follow his lead and immediately beg for more. Mukoda ends up cooking non-stop for a solid hour, refilling plates like an overworked festival chef. Once everyone's stuffed, he brings out a box of crackers for dessert. The moment they taste it, all three familiars melt into pure bliss, claiming their mouths feel like they're dissolving from the sweetness. Mukoda smiles, happy they enjoyed it, but deep down he regrets sharing his precious stash. The next morning, with the emotional stability of a zombie, Mukoda drags himself to the guild, hoping Elaland has finished processing the Earth Dragon so they can finally eat. He meets Ugor in the dungeon and asks excitedly if the work's done. Before Ugor can answer, Elaland himself comes out, looking way too cheerful for someone who hasn't slept. They assume the dragon's ready, but no. He proudly explains that he spent the entire night measuring, analyzing, and documenting the dragon. Mukoda thanks him for his effort, though he already knows what that means. the dragon's still untouched. Elin confirms this, but assures them he's ready to process it now. He brings out the guild's strongest blade, a shiny mithril knife, and confidently claims it'll cut through the dragon with ease. Spoiler, it doesn't. The moment he strikes, the knife snaps clean in half. Elin just stands there, staring at the broken blade, his soul clearly leaving his body. And to make things worse, that was their best knife, meaning there's literally nothing else in the guild strong enough to process the dragon. Fel puts 2 and 2 together and dramatically collapses, declaring that their trip was a waste. Mukoda, trying not to panic, asks Ugor if there's any other solution. Ugor suggests they'll need to enter the dungeon to mine some mithril ore and forge a new blade. Hearing that, Fel, Dora, and Sway light up immediately. At least this means they might get to eat later. They even volunteer to go to the dungeon alone, but Mukoda shuts that idea down instantly. He explains that Elin's still recovering and they'll go together later. The familiars pout, clearly disappointed, but Mukoda warns them that rushing in could make them targets, and if they get targeted, their travels and their food will end. That logic hits hard, and they all reluctantly calm down. Wanting to lift their spirits, Mukoda decides to cook them another meal. This time, he makes orc pork kimchi with rice. The smell alone could probably end wars. He serves it to his familiars, and, as expected, they're instantly excited. While they're busy devouring their food like it's their first meal in centuries, Mukoda takes a moment to breathe, letting his brain catch up on what to do next. Meanwhile, far away in Godland, the Divine Group chat is not happy. The gods are fuming because Mukoda hasn't been sending them their usual offerings, or as they like to call it, royalties. The small clique of gods who do know about his arrival in this world are desperately trying to keep it quiet so the others won't find out. But of course, their loud arguing ends up doing the opposite. 2 more gods catch wind of the conversation. Vahagan, the god of war, and Hephaestus, the god of blacksmithing. They drop in like uninvited guests at a family reunion and immediately ask if their colleagues are blackmailing a human for royalties. The original gods try to defend themselves, saying it's not blackmail, it's just appreciation for their divine services. Sure, buddy. Mukoda kneels before the gods in prayer and apologizes for forgetting to send their offerings. He asks them not to fight over him like he's some sort of divine sugar daddy. The 2 new gods, Vahagan and Hephaestus, introduce themselves and tell Mukoda they've heard plenty about him, which, considering the way gossip spreads in the divine realm, is probably not a good thing. Thinking about Hephaestus, Mukoda suddenly remembers his broken knife and asks if the god of blacksmithing could help him make a new one. But before he can even finish his sentence, Hephaestus interrupts like he's been reading the script and says he already knows what Mukoda wants. He promises to grant him his blessing so he can create a weapon even stronger than before. But, of course, there's a catch. The gods have all heard that Mukoda can order things from the other world, and now they want booze. Mukoda agrees, because arguing with gods is never smart, and Hephaestus begins deciding which of Mukoda's familiars would best receive his blessing. His eyes fall on Sway, and he blesses her with blacksmithing powers. Vahag, not wanting to be left out, insists on blessing someone too. Mukoda quickly says he doesn't need strength for war, but Vahad claims his blessing would be perfect for Fel and Dora. He blesses them both anyway, and Mukoda, in return, sends over a shipment of alcohol and snacks from the online store. Later on, Mukoda checks Sway's stats and sees that she now has blacksmithing skills, which is impressive but kind of useless if they don't have any mithril to work with. Thankfully, Fel reminds him that they killed a mithril lizard earlier and still have its ore. Mukoda realizes he's right, pulls out the ore, and hands it to Sway. Using her newly acquired divine skills, she forges a brand new knife, one far stronger than the broken mithril blade from before. Mukoda can't help but wonder why Fel was so eager to visit the dungeon earlier when he clearly knew they already had the ore. He decides that, yeah, no dungeon trip for now. Fel protests, of course, because he wants an excuse to fight something, but Mukoda isn't having it. With the new knife complete and the dragon ready to process, he checks his familiar's updated stats and nearly passes out. Both Fel and Dora have gained battle reinforcement. Mukoda just stands there staring at the numbers in horror while his familiars look back at him like, "You see it too, right?" And he's somehow the weakest member of his own team.